Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We're talking about this toxic political environment in which we find ourselves. Yes, there's been yet another assassination attempt upon former President Trump. What do you make of this toxic political environment? It's not new, everybody, and it's not because of him. It's who we are. Don't say it's not who we are. It is who we are. It's what we do. Please go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe there. Hey, Ashley King from Memphis is there over there, and so is Robert. And get on over there, everybody. Like and share the show. Like and share the show. Go to the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Like me there. That's where I can accept friendships. And at Santita J on X. At Santita J uh, on X. So let's get right to it, everybody. Let's talk about this toxic political environment. Oh, he was out for a nice Sunday of golf. And now we find that it wasn't that simple. There was somebody who was there who'd been waiting for him for 12 hours to kill him. What's going on, everybody? I had an Uber driver just a few weeks ago. Hey, Andre. Hey, Bernadette. Hey, Miss Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia, who actually was giggling and cheering on. She said, well, maybe I didn't want him to get taken out, but if they just nicked him just a little bit harder. I said, wow, do you really feel that way? She said, yeah. I said, why? What is it about him that you do not like? Well, I just, I said, I said, hey, that's not the way this is supposed to go, everybody. It really isn't. So let's talk about this. And what is our history here? Uh, you know, and in fact, one Republican congressman, according to this Associated Press report, Dr. David Gibbs, historian from the University of Arizona, and of course, author of the book, Revolt of the Rich. Revolt of the Rich. I encourage you to get it. Hey, Carol Soskin. Hey, Andre. All right. Hey, everybody. Like and share the show. Like and share the show. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Uh, Representative Mike Kelly, a Republican from Pennsylvania, said, I'm in a state of bewilderment of how and what has happened to the United States of America. But should he be bewildered? Dr. David Gibbs, is this new?
This is by far the most tense political environment I've ever seen in my lifetime, and I'm old enough to remember as a child the late 1960s, which were also very tense. But this, I would say, is at least as bad, and I would say probably worse. I think you'd have to go back much further in American history, maybe to the 1850s, to have a comparable situation to what we have now. Um, and for a long time, I really did think it was overwhelmingly the Republican Party that was responsible for it, but I think it's clear it's bipartisan. If you look at the recent, attempted assassin, this guy Ruth, I think is how you pronounce his name.
Mhm.
He, he voted for Trump in 2016, but then became vitriolically anti-Trump, echoing on social media and various public statements a lot of the talking points of the Democratic Party and the sort of echo chamber in the media about him being a threat to democracy, which of course he's entitled to say, but it does seem that that was one of his motives for trying to kill Trump, was basically that Trump was a threat to democracy along the lines the Democratic Party has been claiming for a long time. Let me say, I think Trump is a threat to democracy, but I think increasingly both parties are adopting very undemocratic and indeed anti-democratic methods of getting their way. And I'm not sure the Democrats really have that much advantage in terms of being stalwart supporters of democracy at this point. There are a number of indicators of this. If you look at what people have been saying just informally, I was just at a social event about a month ago after the first, but not the second assassination attempt. And, a friend of mine who's a very level-headed person said she regretted that the shooter didn't actually kill Trump. And so there is a culture now of violence. And everybody I know is a Democrat. I personally am not. I'm an independent, but everybody I know is a Democrat. And so I'm steeped in that culture. And I can tell you factually, there is significant support for using undemocratic and indeed potentially violent means in some cases to get our way. And so it's not just the Republicans who are saying this or doing it, as it would seem today. I was just listening to Glenn Greenwald's excellent podcast yesterday, and he, presented Dan Goldman, a very prominent Democratic congressman from New York, who was on Jen Psaki's talk show a few months ago, and he talked about the need to use the word eliminate Donald Trump. And I think he didn't say kill, and I think he probably did not mean kill. He probably meant something like remove him from the ballot or remove him from politics. But he used the word eliminate, all right, which is a rather careless thing to say. I didn't see Jen Psaki expressing any opposition to this or any reservation or anybody else.
But let me say this. In politics, and I grew up in it, and I grew up in the civil rights movement, moreover. When you say eliminate, that means to end someone's life.
I agree.
And people, I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
But that having been said, you know what that means.
Yep.
You know what that means.
That's right.
Because in fact, when people write up assassination plans, they talk about eliminating a principle. Yep. That's what. Okay, see, that's what I'm talking about, Dr. Gibbs.
That's right. I mean, for somebody, and I believe he's a Harvard Law School graduate.
I mean, and
it's hard to believe he was that careless on purpose. Mm-hmm. So, this is kind of a culture we're steeped in here. I might add that on Greenwald also, he had a clip from Kamala Harris from a year or two ago, where she was on Ellen DeGeneres' show, and she was joking about possibly killing. Again, joking. She cackled loudly, as she often does, about killing Donald Trump or several other Republican leaders, and she was joking. But that's a very unhealthy kind of humor under the circumstances.
Wait, if someone joked about her that way, they'd be racist. They'd be misogynist.
Yeah.
See, everybody, I'm talking about evening the playing field.
Yeah.
And this is not an academic, no pun intended, discussion for me, Dr. Gibbs. I grew up with the Chicago police outside of my home. They were there till I was about 21. I wasn't at home until I was 21. But part of me had a lot of anxiety about going away to college because we had security inside of the house. I was driven to school by a man who had a gun. Okay? And I've had to live with I've had to live with violence committed in the name of politics. I'm not the only one. So, please, I'm not asking for anyone's sympathy. I'm just telling you that this is something that happens, as you have rightly pointed out, on both sides.
That's right.
And I think everybody's poisoning the well here. And a lot of people can get hurt at the very least.
Yep. What I'm worried about is if, let us say, somebody does kill Trump, if he were killed in this instance, there would have been counter violence. There may well be counter violence anyway. Mm-hmm. And so, and that just is that will not lead to any good place. I've been worried for some time now about the danger of this erupting in violence.
Why?
Well, there's a tone right now. There's an ugly tone beyond anything I've seen before. And again, it's bipartisan. I mean, of course, we all heard what Trump is saying about these vicious things about Haitian immigrants. Yeah, and that is disturbing. I'll say that is disturbing. And I wouldn't be surprised if that were to lead to violence. And people are right to condemn him for that. But it's not just Trump who's the problem here, is the point that was what I'm seeing. It's bipartisan. There's one more point I did want to make, which is that there's a second motivation, which is this man, Ruth was this is a matter of record, a enthusiast for the Ukraine war. He apparently traveled to Ukraine. He was doing all sorts of activist activities for Ukraine. I believe he was interviewed in the New York Times about his activism on Ukraine. He was that prominent. And, he sees Trump as somebody who is insufficiently strong on supporting Ukraine. He might cut off the aid to Ukraine. That does seem to have been possibly another motive for him to kill Trump. And I think what that suggests is blowback, basically, the dangers of overseas adventures. People like to think of this as the good war, the Ukraine war, but there is no such thing. What it reminds me of is in the 1980s, there was a similar good war in Afghanistan. We're backing the Mujahideen guerrillas, Islamist extremists, basically. And, then basically Al-Qaeda and the Taliban emerged from them and attacked us. Osama bin Laden, it's a matter of record, worked with the CIA in the 1980s in Afghanistan. The CIA recruited thousands of Islamic extremists from all over the world and put them in Afghanistan to fight the Soviets. All right, many of them became terrorists. We could be seeing possibly something like that here, in that there are all sorts of crazies who are going to to Ukraine,
Mhm.
with apparently U.S. official encouragement, it would seem, at least verbal encouragement, if not other kinds of encouragement. And it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that some of these people will come back and engage in violent acts in this country, as this man just did. I doubt this is going to be the last case of it either. We're going to possibly see a new wave of terrorism from crazies coming out of Ukraine with lots of training. In his case, he didn't actually have training, but he had ideological training, and a sense of violence and mission. And so this is one of the prices we pay for these overseas adventures, of which Ukraine is just one more of these overseas adventures. Again, it's not just going to be he's only going to kill Donald Trump. So if you aren't a Republican, you shouldn't be worried, because again, this can lead to a spiral of violence, and very possibly will lead to a spiral of violence. So I think people we should be careful what we wish for. All right. If we wish basically for somebody to attack Donald Trump, well, Trump supporters can do that to us as well. We can also be caught in the crossfire. There's all sorts of dangers that can emerge from this. Our people, whoever you define our people, can be killed too, just as easily. I would prefer not to see this spiral of violence at all. I think it'll be much better. And I really would. I've always been a bit uncomfortable with the extreme rhetoric that's been emerging, the relentless comparing of Trump to Hitler. Not because he is a bad man, I'll grant that, but relentlessly comparing him to Hitler raises the question of, well, if he's that bad, why not shoot him? I guess a lot of people are drawing that conclusion. And so there is an issue of tone and rhetoric here that really does need to be addressed.
And the comparison is based upon what? It's like, what are you talking about?
I
I
think
mean,
that, yeah,
it becomes your. People just. Hitler, evil guy, no question about it.
yep,
But it seems to me, it seems like that. I'm always looking at people and how he went from being a hero to being a zero. And the more he went to, let's get out of Afghanistan. I'm gonna go see Kim Jong Un, with whom we are at war. Everybody, technically, Dr. Gibbs, we have an armistice agreement
that's
with
right.
North Korea. We don't have a peace treaty.
That's right.
He shoots all these missiles and does all. He is at war. We are at war with him.
I myself would like to see more negotiation with North Korea, as I would like to see more negotiation with everybody. So myself, Trump meeting with him, I don't see that. Talking, there's nothing wrong with talking. I for one, like talking. I think talking is a good thing myself. But it's. I think the issue we have is things have become, the rhetoric has become too heated, and there is a real danger here to rhetoric. So I think, again, we should be very careful saying it's all just Trump's fault, because it's not all just Trump's fault. It's both parties are at fault here. I see somebody said there's no comparison, and well, Trump was the one who had 2 assassination attempts against him. All right, so we should not take that lightly. We should take that very seriously. Mm-hmm. All right, and ask how that happened. And first of all, we don't know much about the motives, but this one we do know about the motives. And the motives were, this person was an anti-Trump partisan and a pro-Ukraine partisan. All right, and it does indicate there's something wrong with the rhetoric here, that it's encouraging people like Ruth to go out and try and put a bullet in Trump's brain, which is what he tried to do.
And you don't sit on I support Kamala Harris. That having been said, maybe, no, because I have lived with this every day. Yeah, I'm feeling some kind of way about this. I am. And I think that this is because nobody will win, everybody. Nobody's going to win. When you start to, what my father says, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth leaves you blind and toothless. You can't eat anything that you like, and you will not be able to see. Arlene said, let's be serious. Trump has poisoned the political discourse. Dems are not perfect, but there is no comparison. Yeah, there is. I mean, I think that the poison has come from everybody. I mean, I just, And that might be an unpopular view, but honestly, he's not the only one to have poisoned this discourse. I remember, and I love President Carter. Love him. I think he's been just there's not been a finer president, in my opinion, in the modern era. Not at all. Just a humane man. He did talk about ethnic purity. You remember that? And he was and ethnic purity is racist. And he was a centrist Southern governor, which is what gave people like Julian Bond and Reverend Jackson cause to pause. But as we saw how he governed, we saw that he was essentially a decent man, and he continued to grow with the job, and there you have it. But everybody, this going after him the way that we're doing it and the way it's being reported, as I'm going to bring up Jim Narakis from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, just after you go, Dr. Gibbs. I don't see this. If we all don't stop, this will not end well, Dr. Gibbs.
I think that's generally part of a culture here that is becoming very authoritarian and um, pro censorship in a lot of ways. I mean, we've been seeing a lot of censorship against the supporters of the Palestinian people. We see it on college campuses. The Republicans are calling for it, but it's very bipartisan. Again, I just saw Hillary Clinton recently interviewed by Rachel Maddow, talking about. She vaguely talked about the need for possibly criminal prosecutions or civil cases against people who spread disinformation, as if there's no such thing as the First Amendment. Um, and this is also a very dangerous tendency here. Personally, I thought it was a terrible idea to ban Trump from X, just because, again, we have this thing called free expression and freedom of speech, even for bad people. All right, even for bad people. And it just seemed absurd that you're going to try and suppress the freedom of speech of the president of the United States, which is exactly what they did. And again, this is the kind of atmosphere, I think, that can lead to violence and has led to violence, as we've seen just recently. So I think that also I should add the media has become overly polarized. I mean, Fox News has always been that way. We know that. But now the rest of the media is virtually seems like an agency of the Democratic Party. It seems almost indistinguishable from the Democratic Party. When I'm listening to Rachel Maddow and a lot of other people, I feel like I'm listening to somebody from the Democratic National Committee. This is not healthy. The whole idea of journalistic objectivity seems to have gone away completely, and that's just not a healthy atmosphere.
Well, what would you like to say before you go?
What's that?
What would you like to say before you go? What do you want us to think about? Because
Uh,
everybody
I,
talks
I
about.
suppose we could think about the possibility of escalating violence. We many of us have seen the movie Civil War, and I don't think that's an accurate movie because I don't think that we'd have a breakup of the country like that. But something we could have is the possibility of just mass random violence. Let us not forget there's a country with a lot of guns, including a lot of automatic weapons, people with big magazines. And I could see that getting out of hand very quickly if things continue to escalate. And I think basically de-escalating is a responsibility here of both sides of the spectrum, not just the Republicans, but both sides. I would prefer to see avoiding violence at all costs as maybe the number one priority here. Okay, guys, we'll have to teach my class, so I'm going to have to go.
Well, thank you, and my love to the students. I wish I were there with you.
Thank you very much, Santita. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Dr. David Gibbs, everybody, get the book, The Revolt of the Rich. The Revolt of the Rich. Sending you so much love today. Thank you. Jim Narakis of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting.
Hi. Hi, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing great. We have we've queued it up for you. Um, and I'm seeing, the comments, and I hear you. Many of you disagree with me. I do. I see vitriolic. I've heard vitriolic rhetoric on both sides, and I have seen the corporate media line up not to objectively give you information. I mean, no, they're very subjective. The people who praised him, what in 2015, now want to bury him. I have a lot of questions about that. That having been said, that is not their job. Their job is to tell me what he's doing, what she's doing, ask the right questions. I just saw Kamala Harris, the vice president, Madam Vice President, questioned about Gaza by the NABJ. I said, now that's the kind of interview I wish I had seen with him when he was here in Chicago uh, weeks ago. And they really pushed her on Gaza. I think as well they should have, because this is we're trying to you could lead the free world. We need to know where you stand, but I don't need you to put you and your opinions in my way. And right now, not only is that happening, but there's almost a gleefulness about about watching someone get hurt or worse. And that, for me, everybody, I don't care what he's done. I don't care what he's done. That is not how you handle conflict. And remember, what some people want to see happen to him could happen to someone you like and love. It's just not that's not the way this is supposed to go. But political violence here is not new. It's what we have lived with. Jim Norikis, help me to understand how this is all being reported.
Yeah. At first, I want to take issue with Dr. Gibbs.
Mhm.
The claim that he sees a sort of mirror image of right and left in the media. That I don't see that. I don't see the 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 liberal, so-called liberal media playing the same role as Fox News does, or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Post. And frankly, I see like the New York Times abdicating its responsibility to discuss the dangers of Donald Trump in a forthright, accurate way. There was an op-ed written by Mr. Sulzberger, the publisher of the New York Times, in the Washington Post, where he talked about the threat that Donald Trump poses to a free press because he's threatening to jail journalists. And and he drew parallels to leaders that Trump admires in other countries who have cracked down on the press, who basically stifled the press in their country, and indicated that he views Trump as a danger to do this in the United States. And I think this is all true. And I think this is just one facet of the threat that Donald Trump poses to democracy. I think the most importantly, the threat he poses to free elections is something that we need to be alarmed about. But Mr. Sulzberger went on to say that he was not going to abandon the New York Times traditional neutrality in the election. That he was going to continue to report both sides, both the side that wants to put people like him in prison, and the side that is not calling for his imprisonment, as if they are both equally valid, equally reasonable people presenting visions of what we should do with the country. And in fact, if you look at the New York Times opinion pages, there was they have recently been doing a series of responses to each night of the Democratic and Republican conventions, and then a response to the debate. And they brought in a bunch of in-house and out-of-house pundits to talk about what happened. And of the out-of-house pundits that they brought in, this is 36 people in all, every single one of them was a conservative. They had 36 right-wingers to talk about the Republican convention, the Democratic convention, the debate, what it meant. This is bending over backwards to be fair to the people that want to put you in prison for doing your job as a journalist. I think that is nuts, frankly.
Let me ask you this. Let me posit this proposition. Is he trying to be fair, or is this where his politics really are? Because they do this all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the war. Look at the role they played in pushing us into Iraq.
Right.
As we were in the streets by the millions saying, "Do not invade. Don't go in there." They had one of the most prominent journalists in journalism who was on their staff, who was reporting outright lies. that helped to push us, that helped to shape public opinion. Certainly, well, the newspaper of record for the United States could justify supporting what now everybody feels was an unmitigated disaster. Not to mention the fact that we killed more than 1 million people inside of a
Right.
year.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're seeing the same kind of politics from the New York Times and many other outlets in the media on Gaza, where mass slaughter of Palestinians is presented as a legitimate self-defense on the part of Israel, and the idea that of criticizing this is deemed to be anti-Semitic. There's as Dr. Gibbs was saying, that there's a tremendous amount of censorship against people who are putting forward a viewpoint that the genocide has to stop. But this is presented as an extreme, hateful position from many people, not just the New York Times, but many outlets in the media are taking this position. It's I think we're going to look back on this era the way we look back on the invasion of Iraq as a shameful period where media abdicated its responsibility and allowed for tremendous bloodshed to be carried out in our name.
Well, well, let me ask you this. Did media just start with this administration or in this moment? Or have they been doing this for a while? I mean, part of it, to me, one of the things that the reason I followed the work of fairness and accuracy in reporting so closely is because I have not seen fairness and accuracy in reporting. And so, I mean, I have always been able to rely on you to say, hey, wait a minute. I can't find Medea Benjamin like 20, 30 years on TV. I can't find it.
Right.
Jewish Voice for Peace. No, they're not around. But every time we want to talk about Gaza, they have the generals on. They have someone from the FBI, from the CIA. That's it.
Yeah. Warriors are experts on war. You don't have peace activists as experts on peace. That's not part of the Rolodex of the media. It does not have in it people who are advocates for peace, for negotiation, for political settlement for the world's problems. You have people who are advocates for the use of violence to solve our problems. And that is, I think that when you look at the recent incidents involving Donald Trump, these are not, as you say, these are not aberrations in our history. This is not something that's come out of the blue. Like why are people suddenly trying to kill the president? People have been trying to kill the president for decades, sometimes successfully, but more often unsuccessfully. And there are many incidents that, like I was reading roundups of histories of attacks on presidents, and many of the attacks that have been carried out have been forgotten. If you're counting people, like it's one thing when like someone's actually wounded, as Trump was apparently at the rally, but if you're counting people who have a gun in the vicinity of the president as an assassination attempt, well, by that standard, there were 11 assassination attempts against Barack Obama. Some of which involved live gunfire. Others just involved people, sending bombs, sending Bryson through the mail, various ways of trying to kill Barack Obama. That happened 11 times. So this is not like something that just started with Donald Trump, and so we should be wondering, are we speaking too meanly about Trump? Are we speaking too forcefully about his threat to democracy? Because I think it's really vitally important that we keep speaking about Donald Trump's threat to democracy. But we really need to be asking something about what is wrong with our country. Why is there so much political violence has been a factor going back to the beginning of our country.
Because it did not, one of the things, just to interrupt you or just to engage you here, I love watching these HBO reenactments about the life of Benjamin Franklin and John Adams and, well, the History Channel, Benjamin Franklin and Ulysses Grant, because you see them in real time. You see what General Grant dealt with in war, what he saw and how horrified he was by it. You see that Benjamin Franklin, no, he was an Anglophile. He was an English citizen who was treated so poorly by the British that they made him to begin to change his mind about America, and he began to embrace being an American as he got older. I mean, it's like, wait a minute, everybody, this stuff is not as clean as you make it out to be, Jim. There's a lot to this. And Flora, I hear you said that he, meaning Trump, began the chaos and vitriolic rhetoric. Now it has backfired. He's creating a crisis. I wish no harm to anyone, but he started that many years ago. While I hear you, I just respectfully disagree, because this vitriolic rhetoric has been with us for a long, long, long time, Jim. We traffic in it.
Yeah, I do think that Trump has
he's contributed significantly, no question. What? I'll say this to you. My father said, you know what's unfortunate about him, and he ought to know because he's got charisma off the charts, right? He said, well, his disappointment is that, because charisma is a gift of the spirit. When you can bring people to you and they will follow you and they want to work with you and they'll sacrifice for you, you have a God-given obligation to serve these people and to make them better. That's how I was raised, Jim Durakis. That's and I really believe that with all my heart.
Trump has.
And I think
sorry.
he's abandoned. No. I think that he has not lived up to that. And
Trump has gifts. Trump is a gifted orator in some ways, but they are not the gifts that your father has.
well, no,
He does not have the gift of bringing people together. He does not have the gift of lifting us up. He has the gift of making people angry.
But
And
I'm
this is
saying
the essence of Trumpism.
Yeah,
is to insult, to attack, to demean, to create fear, and the targets of that rhetoric respond the way that, as you would imagine, if you're in a bar room and you start insulting a patron, they are going to get angry, riled up, and get mad at you. And this is the genius of Trump, is that he picks his targets, he gets them angry, and their anger is what binds his coalition together.
And mind you, I'm agreeing with you 100%. I wasn't trying to make him
No.
And that's not.
I'm just saying he doesn't have. This is what he can do. This is what he knows how to do. If he could not change himself to be the sort of orator that is talking about what we all have in common, what brings us together. That isn't in him. He does not have that in his soul. And he has a lot of anger and vitriol in his soul, and he knows how to use it. He uses it very well.
The point that my father was making was, if he had a change of spirit, because my father's a Christian and he's a minister, you are transformed by the renewing of your mind. He said, if he had a redemptive moment and changed, he could use this power that he's using negatively. Oh my gosh, what he could do with the power that he's got if he used it in a positive way, but he's not. That's my only point, Jim. I'm like people will say that I know what he said. I understand it. You're missing my point, everybody. I'm simply saying, because I got the facts too, Robert. I hear you. Because I'm not saying that he's Reverend. I'm telling you what Reverend Jackson said, what he observed. He said if he used these gifts that he has, because these gifts only come from God. If he used them positively, oh my gosh, he could bring the country together. He could help us all to grow. But he's not using them that way. He's using these gifts to tear people down, to make them feel bad. He goes after the vulnerable. I get it all.
And I do want to agree with the point that, like, people should not take the bait. People should not respond in kind to Donald Trump, because that is what Donald Trump is looking for.
Yeah.
And that is, the divide and conquer strategy has been one of the key tools, not just for Donald Trump, but for the ruling class of this country for a quarter of a millennium. And the essence of the divide and conquer strategy is, you say, let's you and him fight. And when you fool half the people and get them to attack the other half of the people, the part that's attacked needs to see that the people who have been divided against them are not the enemy. The point is to unite and realize that you are being played by both sides, are being played by people who want to maintain their power. They don't want a united public. They don't want people to come together to see that they have common interests and common goals that they can achieve together. They want half the people thinking that the other half are the people who are the danger, who you should be afraid of and you should be angry towards.
Jim, we're all being played here. We can't even have a discussion about Ukraine because you've got some of the most prominent Democrats and Republicans whose families are invested in the big companies over there, Jim. And the corporate media won't even report on it. I mean, Jim, what am I supposed to do with that? Yeah. And now, I promise you, if something happens to him, I mean, I've got Dr. LaShawn Latrice, a community psychologist. Perhaps she can help us with this. Jim, I'm wondering where all of this is going to. I mean, the thing is, if something happened to Donald Trump, the country would come off the rails.
Yeah, no, the violence is not any kind of answer. There's no gun solution to this. In fact, I think the solution is to reverse the nutty ruling that the Supreme Court has issued, the series of rulings that they've issued that make it impossible to have any kind of reasonable gun regulation in this country. Mm-hmm. And I think that a country that has the access to military grade weaponry that our country does, it's impossible to be safe. That's as long as it's possible to go out and buy a semi-automatic rifle with a range of God knows how many hundreds of yards, there's no place you can go where you're safe if you're outside a bunker. And that's true of presidential candidates, and it's true of school children who are trying to go to school and learn their ABCs, but also have to learn how to do live shooter drills in their classrooms, because there's no way to keep people from having access to what amount of weapons of mass destruction.
Well, I mean, what is the answer? Because I think we've got to, I don't want to put all of that on you, Jim, but I have unapologetically. I mean, because I think that everybody needs to be challenged to get to our best selves. Everybody.
Yeah.
And just say, you know what? Don't respond to Trump in this way. Stop responding to him. I mean, they need to let pundits on. I don't want the anchor to say it. I want them to shut up and give me the news and move on out the way. But get different people will say, enough already. Enough. Because we're not winning here. Nobody's winning, Jim. Nobody's winning. We will all lose. I promise you, if something happens to him, I remember when Reverend was running, many people didn't think that he was going to make it through. In fact, Jack White, who was a prominent writer for Time magazine at the time, he did the first big Time magazine article on Reverend and the run. That was like in August of 1983, as we were about to go into the campaign. The New Black Power was the title of the cover story on him, right? And he said, people are wondering why, because he said I was home, in the little interregnum between the end of summer school and going back to college. And met Mr. White, and it turns out his father was a very prominent physician at Howard, who I knew, and all that other great stuff. And as he wrote, he would ask me, how do you feel about this? Because at that time, the worry was that he would not make it through, because we were not even 20 years away from Dr. King's assassination. Hey, y'all, I was on the trip with Whitney Young when he drowned, and it frightened everybody over there. Bayard Rustin was on this trip, Jim Narakis, Congressman John Conyers, Congressman Stokes. Oh my goodness. The President Nixon sent a plane to pick up Whitney Young's body. Okay, this man was John Lewis was on this trip, right? He was the one who told us that he drowned, and it was frightening because it was just shy of 3 years after Dr. King had been murdered, and everybody was freaked out. There comes a point when Ramsey Clark and his wife, the former Attorney General, they were on the trip. And you all, I'm just trying to give you all some history here. And I'm going to bring up Dr. LaShawn Latrice. Jim, he said, I know you've seen a lot. And aren't you worried about your dad? I said, I am. I said, but I know he's got to do this. I know people are now demanding. He had tried to get Maynard Jackson to do it, Andrew Young to run, and the people were not hearing it. I said, so now here we are. And he wrote he and other people wrote that he's tempting fate on many levels. Yeah, and it made me cringe when I read that. But someone who was a friend of ours in another campaign said, yeah, and if something happens to him, we don't know where the Furies will turn. So it would be to their advantage to leave him be. I'm just trying to let you all know I've lived through these histories. I mean, I've been living with it's cyclical with me, Jim, and I've seen it over and over and over again. And I got to tell you, I'm exhausted because we don't win the language is so bad, Jim. And I'm holding the press responsible for this in part because they're not doing anything to tamp down the language. They encourage it in these panels, Jim. I'm going to ask Dr. LaShawn Latrice because we're seeing this and you see it out in the streets anytime, Jim. I had an Uber driver who was laughing about President Trump's assassination attempt and kind of laughing about, well, I wish he'd moved a little closer. I said, oh, whoa, wait a minute. No, that's not what you want to do. And I support Kamala Harris. But I'm not going to support any kind of violence, even when Trump speaks it. You know what? I'm gonna be better than that, Jim.
I think it's wise. I don't think that that meeting violence with violence, meeting hate with hate is, as Dr. King said, hate can't put out hate. Only love can put out hate.
He said, if I'm the last person in the room who's preaching nonviolence and who embraces it, the media calls Trump out for his hateful rhetoric, and they let other people go. Arlene, that's what bothers me. A lot of people said a lot of hateful things, and it gets buried, and it needs to stop because they promoted him. This is a monster that they helped to make, y'all. I have never seen in all the years I've been around television, more than 50 years, all of my conscious life. I have never seen someone who would be allowed to call into the big television shows. The Today Show, you can call in. You can call into Good Morning America. They let him do that. They helped to create this.
Yeah. As the CEO of Viacom said, it's not good for America, but it's good for CBS.
How about that? It's the money. Dr. LaShawn Latrice, I know you've been listening. She just sits and takes notes. She's a psychologist. Don't say another word, Jim. No, I'm saying don't say another word because psychologists, all they do is take notes on you and give you a script telling you that you're a nut. So thank you, Doc. No, you got to unmute yourself. Oh gosh, I'm
I'm
scared.
sorry.
So what do you
I
make?
have been listening.
Okay, so your thoughts,
Well,
doctor,
my thoughts are,
head doctor, no joke.
first of all, hello, everyone.
Hello.
It's been disheartening to see assassination attempts. It's been disheartening to see the rhetoric that's promoted across the aisles. It's also disheartening to see the number of people that have gravitated to negativity that has been spewed over beyond this campaign, but even in other campaigns. And I think what happened is people have developed some sort of normalcy. They think this is normal to put out that violence like that. And because of the state of the world right now, we can't afford to continue to let things propel and get worse. And it seems to me that the trauma that's been associated with watching all of these things that have taken place, from massive school shootings across the board, and for people even coming to say that they want to harm people because they don't like their candidate. It's ludicrous to think that we could think that that's normal. So for me, I can't even understand how we got to this point. But if we look at the entire situation, like you said, Santita, over time, a lot of things have been permitted and has been propelled and promoted. And when we look up, we can't really afford to just think that it's just going to stop completely, when in fact it's actually getting worse. And we're in a post-COVID society now. So in this post-COVID world, look at how things are done now. We do a lot of Zooms. We do everything on the computer. We do so many different things. And now there's this need to have protection so that we're not sick. But then the violence is running rampant, just completely rampant. And it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And when I think about my children, I think about how I push them to go vote. I push them to make sure that they're a part of everything that's normal for us to do in the society that we live in. We don't even think about how this is impacting them. They were literally snatched up out of everything and told, you're going to stay in the house, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. Everything from A to Z has changed, but then the violence just perpetuated. It got worse, and it seems like now the violence has overtaken what we thought safety looked like. There is no such thing now. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter where you drive. It doesn't matter. And so to see the political arena turning into this, it is so sad. It is truly a sad day.
Well, I mean, Jim,
Yeah, I think your reference to COVID, I think, is critical. I think that the violence of allowing 1 million Americans to die is something that, and having to pretend that this is not a big problem, that it's no big deal that we're having a 7-figure death toll to this disease, and acting like we should just go on as normal. I think that does real harm. It did real harm to our psyches. I think.
but Jim,
we're all under PTSD from that.
No, hold that thought. Because let me tell you where my PTSD also goes. Bob Woodward, you can't be president unless you sit down and talk with him. Interestingly, Trump confided in him because that's how they get you. They come and they're walking with you, and they're interviewing you by being your friend or being friendly, right, Jim? So you just start talking and you relax, and everything's on the record, but LaShawn, that's why I try to tell folks who do media, like, you got to be careful, got to have parameters. That's why Michael Jackson would have, while you're recording him, he had his own crew recording you, recording him. Okay. Oh, no. Because he was clear on the game.
I like that.
Okay. All right. So you look up, and Bob Woodward, Trump says, we've got this disease out here. This is like in February, before they locked everything down. He said, this is awful. And we think it might be a lab leak, but we don't know. Out of China, we don't know what it is, but we do know about gain of function. We do know that this is a virus that's been juiced up, but no one knows how it's transmitted. It's a mess. And they're different people are coming up with different medicines, but I don't even know what to say to people. And in leadership, you can't say everything that you know, Jim. Dr. Latrice. That's one of the things that I learned. Sometimes you just have to sit on information, because if you say, hey, everybody, we need to go through the emergency exits, people are going to storm the exits, and then you got a bigger mess. Bob Woodward never said a word, Jim, for that same period of time. This is a man who leaked information and reported it and put a president out of office. And you mean to tell me, while you're watching tens of thousands of Americans die every month, you had nothing to say? You were waiting for your book to be published? And no one ever, people asked a little bit of a question about that. They didn't say anything. I said, are you for real? No, I don't like the way the Trump administration handled it. I don't like the way anybody handled it, quite frankly, because, you wouldn't let other medicines in when people tried to ask you about stuff that I could take that might work. I got shut down and called a conspiracy theorist. I'm like, are you joking me? I've got a father who is about to be 80 and a mom who's in her late 70s. I got to see them. I'm trying to figure out how not to get this thing, so that if I get it, I don't want to kill them. But I'm the bad guy if I'm asking a question. But I got to listen to Fauci with all the things that he did wrong with AIDS. God bless him, but he did. Love him to pieces. Have a lot of admiration for him, but sorry, nobody's perfect. So for Bob Woodward, as an esteemed member of the press, to say nothing when the president gives you this information, he gives it to you just like this, Jim. Leak that.
Yeah, Bob Woodward is he's about selling books. He's not about informing the public. If he's got information in his book, it's going to stay in his book until it comes out. And he also, I think of his books as historical fiction rather than journalism, because there aren't sources. There aren't sources for most of his claims. You just have to trust Bob Woodward when he says so and so said this, without any indication of whether that person talked to Bob Woodward or
at all.
Yeah.
Trust the science. Just trust. I just love y'all. I'm sorry, Jim.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I only have a couple more minutes left, but I want to give them to you and to Dr. Latrice. Dr. Latrice, we have a group think going on here now. And I guess my problem is, Jim and Dr. Latrice, I'll say this very quickly. Dr. King was murdered because the climate had been set for him to be murdered. More than 55% of Black Americans did not approve of him. He could not get a church. He was going to retire from the movement at 39. He was going to he considered fasting unto the point of death, because he was that rejected by our people, which opened the door for these people to kill him. Okay. More than 70% of white Americans couldn't stand him. So in the space of 2 years, 3.5 years, from the Nobel Prize to that. Okay. We set the climate. We're the ones. And then after he was killed, he was the greatest thing. He was the king of love. Yeah, I'm just saying, y'all, I'm not making Trump Dr. King, but I want you to know, when Dr. King was alive, when Dr. King was alive, most Black folks did not like him. That's real. I've lived through that in my own life. And white people, he was persona non grata, but he was persona non grata in the Black community too, Jim. He was. And we have to be honest about that, Dr. LaShawn Latrice. That's where groupthink gets dangerous. Those are the facts.
Mm.
1 minute for you, Dr. Latrice. What do you want us to know after you've observed everything? Write that prescription. I
just want you all to know that I think that we have to continue to have intentional conversations like this, because unless we want to continue this type of rhetoric and behavior to perpetuate in the communities and get worse across voting lines, we have to have the conversation. It's imperative that we let people know that no matter what your thoughts are on a candidate, it does not mean it's worth making attempts on his or her life. I disagree with that totally, and I think it puts jeopardy in the hands of those who go vote. I
Oh
heard
yeah.
saying they don't know if they want to go stand in line because they may have to deal with people who want to hurt them because of who they choose to vote for. And that's very real, very real. I've seen it. I've seen it on the voting, standing in line. I've seen it just in having discussions with people, how people take these things so personally. And it's just definitely something that we have to continue this conversation on, because we have to let people know there's nowhere in the world that we should be talking along the lines of promoting violence when it comes to a presidential candidate or any other candidate for that matter. So I just think as long as we collaborate together and unite on what is right, this is the humane thing to do for the sake of humanity.
Because the poison is going to come. It bleeds.
Absolutely.
I guess that's my only point. I mean, I'm not making Trump Dr. King. Are you kidding me? But I just want y'all to know when Dr. King was alive, y'all didn't think much of him either.
No.
Just Jim, facts are facts.
Yeah, no, he underwent, and in fact, when he was concentrating on racism in the South, northern newspapers liked him. When he started talking about racism in the North and talking about the Vietnam War,
Yes.
And drawing parallels, he became a lot less popular, and a lot of people were basically saying in the media, we're saying, stay in your lane, Dr. King. This is not, you're messing things up by talking about, the killing of people abroad. That is not something that pastors are supposed to be talking about.
And you're messing up my money, military industrial complex. Now, because he was about to become the most powerful anti-war voice in the world, because he was the principal speaker at the largest anti-war march in history up to that point. 1 million people in Central Park in New York.
Yeah, and I will just quote Malcolm X to close out by saying that you have to be careful of the newspapers because they will have you hating the oppressed and loving the people doing the oppressing.
Well, mic drop on that. Jim Narakis of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. Get extra. Support fair.org. We need them. Oh, we need them. Don't listen to me. Listen to them. Okay? Because they track the media, the corporate media. I got you corrected me on that. The corporate media, they track them. But they track all media. Because what they're trying to help you to do is to see what's really happening, everybody. Arlene says, thank you, Jim. And I thank you, Jim. I thank you for the work you and Janine do, and you and your team.
Thank you.
Wonderful people through you. And I appreciate the fact that you are pushing the truth. Because really, that's it. That's it. And Dr. LaShawn Latrice, thank you for the work that you do, looking at not just at people, but the whole community. Because collectively, we're not well. And that's what you're seeing with this political vitriol. Wherever it is, you can't sit on the sofa with Ellen and laugh about Trump getting killed. That's not what you do. Don't do that. Because these people will turn this around on you. Don't do not just because of that. It's just not the right thing to do. If you disagree with someone, vote about it. Just get out there and vote. Vote. And then be active once you finish voting. Get out there and make it happen. It's our country. This land is your land. It's my land. It's made for you and me. But you got to work it, everybody. I love you. See you tomorrow.